Hello. Oh, V, you're muted. We just had a conversation about this too. How it's been like 5 years in a Zoom, and everybody, myself included, Virginia, we all forget.
We said it would be great if everybody had t-shirts that just said you're muted. Now everybody would understand. Hi everyone, it's Virginia Stanley and Grace Caternello. The Library Love Fest team coming to you. 2/3. 1/3 is in the friendly skies. Laney Mays is in our hearts, but in the skies. So Grace and I are here and very happy to talk to you all with our two wonderful authors for this edition of Book Club Snug, where you can meet the authors of your next book club selection. So we are super jazzed to have Crystal Hana Kim and Elizabeth Harris with us. We will bring them on momentarily, but before we do that, we do a little bit of housekeeping, and then dive into the books. So, on April 2nd, we have Eleanor Littman, author of Every Tom, Dick, and Harry, and she's going to be in conversation with her audiobook narrator, Piper Goodeve. So I can't wait to hear this. First of all, Eleanor Littman is such a funny person, and she's a funny writer, and she's funny in person, and she's just absolutely lovely. And they have a great rapport. And I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation between the two of them as they talk about all the sort of ins and outs and the behind the scenes of audiobook narration, and the sort of like, the flow between the two, between the written and the spoken. It's going to be great. I've already heard a little bit about this, so mark your calendars. That's April 2nd at 2:00. What else we have, Grace? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, we have Writers to Watch, our next episode on April 8th at 7 p.m. Eastern time. We have actually four books, five authors, because one of our books co-written, which I love to hear from co-writers, and I think it's really interesting to see how they work together. So be sure to pop in for that one. We're very excited. We are working on getting our May lineup ready for you as well. So be sure to RSVP to Writers to Watch if you're not already. But yeah, do we want to jump right in, Virginia?
We do. Yes, I'm so excited about that Writers to Watch lineup, though. It is
Yeah.
pretty cool. But yeah, let's get right into it. So, as I said, this is a conversation between with authors who have written books that are just perfect for book club selection. So let us, without further ado, bring on our authors, Elizabeth Harris and Crystal Hana Kim. So you, Elizabeth, hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, you're
Okay.
not muted.
Where's the
And Elizabeth, come join our party.
I'm back. Hello.
Thank you both for coming here today to talk to us about your books. Pretty neat.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited.
So are we. So what we're going to do is speak with each of you separately, ask you to talk about your book and why why you feel that these books, we know why, but the themes that you want to touch on that just speak to book clubs, because some books do and some books don't. And before we went on live, we were talking about your own experience with book clubs, which I think is really informative. I think that's really cool because you know what that's about and you know how it works, why it works sometimes and why it doesn't work sometimes, and maybe it's the people and maybe it's the books. So, yeah, so we will dive right in. Is there anything you want to say before we start our chat with Crystal?
No, just thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited. I love book clubs. So Elizabeth and I, we were all just talking about how much we love book clubs and how there's kind of like a magic to them. So
Yeah,
excited.
yeah. I once Bette Midler had an ill-fated television series, and she was on a book club and she hadn't read the book, and the whole episode was about how she didn't read the book.
There always is like one person who hasn't read it and is kind of fumbling their way through.
I think we've
Yeah.
all been the person, right?
Yeah.
I was in this magic book club for years. I was telling them about where there were like 8 of us, and half of the participants were high school English teachers who were just really excited to be reading books they weren't teaching. And everyone always read the book. Like every time it was shocking. It was Mhm.
That's a perfect group too, because then they're picking up on themes and, motifs and stuff like that.
It was the best. It was the best. I'm very sad it ended. I was telling everyone here that a bunch of people moved to the suburbs, and I live in New York City, and suddenly everyone was too far. It was very sad, but for like 8 years, we were great.
That's a long time.
It was a long time. We were like really on it and regular for like 8 years. It was great.
I'm impressed.
Anyway.
That is impressive. Yeah. And that's a sort of an intimate bond, really,
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
not, yeah. So, yeah, you're really sharing. And so that is sad when it goes away. Well,
All the ones who still live nearby came to my book launch, and I got very
Oh.
teary. I was so excited.
oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, it was cute.
That's really sweet. That's so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good to know that, well, I mean, listen, I'm only saying what you guys both said before, that you're would be willing to jump in on a book club.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
For sure.
I
100%.
love doing that. Yeah, I love that more than like the bookstore events because
Mhm.
when the people have read it, their questions are so specific
Mhm.
and you can really tell people's like emotional responses, like they'll be like, why did this person do this? And it's just like a really, really like rich conversation when I join a book club. So I love that.
It's also so cool. I love it too, and I think it's so fun to like this is my first novel, and when I was writing it, I didn't really think about sort of it as a thing out in the world and how it's not really yours anymore, and like people
Mm.
things in the book that didn't occur to me, and but that's real too, like however you read the book is right. And I just think that's just so fun for me. Like every time I talk to a book club, I like learn new things about the book and about how people are responding to it, and I just think that's so cool. So I love it. So invite me, I'll come to anything. Truly, I love book clubs. So find me through HarperCollins. You can also find me, my work email is on my Twitter account, so give me a shout. I'd love to come.
Yeah, me too. And it's so true. Like books are no longer yours after you publish them. I love book clubs when I find out that something that I've written that's like very specifically Korean resonates with somebody from across a different culture. And they'll say like mother-daughter relationships over here are exactly the same. Finding like the universal links are always so fun.
I love that. We're actually
Yeah.
seeing a lot of comments in the chat already. I read Crystal's book last year, loved it. Elizabeth
Oh, thank
was
you.
one of my favorite reads of this year. So people are,
Yay.
yeah, people have already read, which is great. Because then they get to hear, like we just talked about your perspective on your book, because they already have their own. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, that's great. That's cool. This is perfect. I'm loving the vibe. I'm loving it. All right. So without further ado, we'll ask Elizabeth to turn her camera off. We'll talk to Crystal, and then then we'll reverse and then you'll both come back on, and we'll answer any questions that folks have. So there we are. Oh, beautiful. The Stone Home. What a beautiful jacket. Do you love that?
I love it. I love it. They hired a Korean artist to paint it, or to draw, illustrate it. So I felt really lucky.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's
Mhm.
that's just full circle. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, it's really beautiful. And
Yeah.
I love the flowers on the front, because the forsythia flowers have like a special significance in the book. So yeah, and the two birds have a special significance. So they're like little Easter eggs throughout it.
Easter eggs for sure. For
Hmm.
sure. So so let's just jump right in. We have two very discussable books, very different books. Your book, The Stone Home, which came out in hardcover last year
Hmm.
to rave reviews and is now coming out in paperback next month. April 15th is
Yes.
the on sale date. And so one of the things we also wanted to, sort of broad strokes talk about is that books for book clubs can be paper, can be hardcover, can be I mean, it's the content, it's what it delivers and what brings book clubs, great content for conversation. So again, came out in hardcover a year ago, coming out in paperback next month. And this is a very compelling family drama and a coming of age story that reveals a dark corner of South Korean history, which I'm going to leave for you to talk about. But this is just a quick intro here. You're the author of If You Leave Me, which was named the best book of 2018 by over a dozen publications. And you're the recipient of the 2022 National Book Foundation's 5 Under 35. And you're a 2017 PEN Short Story Prize winner. And visiting assistant professor at Queens College. Listen, we can go on. I want to get to not to glance over that quickly, but the reviews for this book have been everywhere. You had starred reviews, the trifecta, book list, PW, Library Journal, for print and audio. And Library Journal gave a quote that I thought spoke to why we're talking with you today. So Library Journal's starred review talks about this book and says, elements of violence and brutality limn a wrenching tale of mental, emotional, and physical endurance and determination for survival. Another well-crafted tale by Kim that is certain to give readers much to talk about. So with that, I turn it over to you to talk about this forthcoming book and to talk about just with the background of book clubs in mind.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Virginia. And thank you. I can't see you, but thank you to people tuning in. Thank you for that lovely quote. It's funny because it's been almost a year, so I've kind of I'm in this like funny in between stage. The hardcover's been out and the paperback's about to come out. And I think paperback is such a great time to get introduced to book clubs or readers that are waiting for that option. The Stone Home, as Virginia mentioned, it's set in a 1980s South Korean reformatory center, and it follows a young 15-year-old girl named Unju and her mother's journey during their 1 year in the center. So there's that storyline, and then there's also a parallel storyline that follows a 16-year-old boy named Sang-chul, who's in the center with his brother. And the narrative weaves together as Unju and Sang-chul meet and as they realize that they have to rely on each other in kind of surprising ways to survive and try to escape. This story is based on true events and real history. So in the 1980s and 1980 South Korea, which is, very recent history, the president then, who was really a dictator, wanted to win the bid for the 1988 Olympics, which I think many of us remember. So he wanted to win the bid for the Olympics because he thought that that would be an opportunity to really kind of herald South Korea onto an international stage to announce itself, to try to get more, quote unquote, soft power. And so he secretly sanctioned the police to create these centers where they could just put in any undesirables, quote unquote, and to put in anybody who is unhoused, put in anyone who they thought would kind of ruin their image of South Korea. And so he succeeded. The president slash dictator succeeded, and South Korea did host the 1988 Olympics in Seoul. And now, I mean, I would say that Korean culture is really like a large part of our American ethos right now, right? There's K-pop and Korean skincare and Korean fried chicken and Korean dramas and all of that. But I guess something that I was curious about in this book was at what cost? And for me, the best way to learn about a different time or learn about a different history, especially if it's difficult, is through first person or through super intimate third person where it's really, really character driven because I love feeling like I'm immersed in a character so that I'm living through a political or social landscape alongside them. And it's not really about these abstract, happenings, but really about like one character's life and their friendships and their relationships. So, this novel, yes, it's set in 1980 South Korea in the center, but it's at its heart, I would say it's a mother-daughter story because it's about Unju and her mom and their kind of differing attitudes of how to survive and get out of the center. It's a friendship story because Unju, when she's in the center, learns how to open up and rely on a community of women. And she has been really a loner for most of her life, and she learns how to be vulnerable and form friendships. And then on the other hand, with the boys, it's a sibling story. I don't know about any of you, but sometimes I feel like I'm so different from my sibling, and I wonder how did the same parents make us? So it's a story of that deep-rooted love despite differences amongst two brothers. I think Virginia mentioned it's a coming of age story because you're following these Inju and Sangchul at this, cusp of adulthood. And I would say it's ultimately a story of hope and kind of like second chances, because one thing that I didn't mention is that the novel actually begins in 2011. There's a frame story that begins in 2011 when a Korean American woman arrives at Unju's home. Unju's now 40, in her 40s. And the Korean American woman arrives with a knife. And she says, "My father has died. He left me this knife and told me to return it to you in exchange for the truth about his past." And that encounter is what forces Unju to think back to her year in the center. And a question that drives that frame story is, who is this Korean American woman? How are they connected? Will she give Unju a second chance at redemption and connection? So that's also kind of a larger theme as well. Is that a good overview, Virginia?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, talking about, this is jotting down some things as you were speaking, because it really is mother, daughter, sibling, coming of age, and this whole, this whole backstory that informed this in the beginning, I think is really interesting. Could you, so in terms of book clubs, there's so much to talk about. It's, there's much to discuss. Um, and there's lots of different points of view, I think. I think it's really interesting you're talking about the siblings. I bet you there are a lot of people out there that say, I'm nothing like my siblings. How did those two people make so many different kinds of people? Uh,
Exactly.
yeah. Um, can you talk a little bit about your research? A little bit
hmm
about that.
Yeah. When I first learned about this in 2016, it was while I was waiting for my first book to come out with HarperCollins. And I read an Associated Press kind of expose because these centers had been very much hidden until 2016. And I just couldn't stop thinking about these kids. And there were these accompanying images in the expose of kids in the back of a truck and one boy in a blue shirt jumping off, or women bent over sewing machines, because they were used as cheap, free labor to create products that were shipped to Europe and Japan and all throughout Korea. So I kept seeing those images, and I didn't think I was going to necessarily write a novel about it, but when I was in Korea in 2018 visiting family, I was able to meet up with one of the survivors of one of these real institutions, which is called the Brothers Home. The survivor's name is Han Jong-san, and he is a very big political activist now. And his like whole passion now is to gain recognition for this, to get the government to admit their, culpability and to try to get some sort of reparations. So I met with him and I ended up talking to him for quite a long time, all day. We, went to a tea house, we went to lunch, and he at first was hesitant to share his story because he said, so many people ask me for my story, right? So many people ask, and then nothing happens. like no change is made. And so at the end of our conversation, he said, you know, I wish you luck and I hope you do something with this information that I've shared. And I think that's really when I committed to this novel and to writing it. And it's difficult subject matter. So I really wanted to think about like, well, how do I make this a story that is a story that'll move people? And that's why I really rooted it in these characters, right? In Ju and Sangchul and their mom and their brother.
Wow. Yeah, there's it's very dark. And I find it really interesting that it was in your mind, and then the conversation with this person, it really kind of brought it full circle, didn't it? Where it needed to be
Yeah.
written. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I
Let's
did a lot of other research too, but that was a starting point, I would say.
yeah, yeah. Well, of course, librarians are, you know, research. They're the interweb before the interwebs, the intrawebs as we called it, before there was one. And so research is such an important part, but it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting about the research, but also interesting. I think that meeting that man sparked something that made this go to page. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then I did a lot of research because there was not a lot about these institutions. I did a lot of research into by reading other texts about similar institutions because these sort of centers have happened time and again, right? So
Yep.
I read Follow the Rabbit Proof Fence, which is written by an Indigenous woman in Australia who was taken from her family many decades ago, and she was put into an institution that was supposed to reform Indigenous people. And I also read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He is an Austrian psychiatrist who wrote a memoir after surviving one of the Nazi concentration camps. And I read these because I wanted to get into the headspace of those who were contained, and also because there are such similarities across cultures. In the repetition of these sorts of centers as a way of government control, right? So those kind of books helped me to get into the psychology so that I can make the characters as complex as possible.
With that connective tissue between all of them, regardless of where they were or when they were, but the fact that they were.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's a great encapsulation of the book. The read is incredible. As I say, it's coming out. Can't believe it's in paperback in
Yeah.
another month. It's wild. And just starred reviews across the board. Just such love for this book. All right, so let's talk now to Elizabeth. So Crystal, if you turn off your camera, and
Of
Elizabeth,
course.
you turn yours on, but don't go too far away because we're going to bring you both on at the end, and then any final questions, and we've got to get to questions from folks as well. So thank you. Thank you, Crystal. And now Grace and Elizabeth.
Yes. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm also nothing like my sibling at all. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. No, I'm also like nothing like my siblings. I get it. It's so funny that the way that happens. And we said that your books are nothing alike, but they all deal with relationships. So really, they are. But before I let you talk a little bit about how to sleep at night, I'm gonna pull up your cover because I love this cover. It's very dreamy. And I love this cover and we were really excited when we all saw it. Um,
Me too. I have nothing to do with it, and they just did such a fantastic job. My job was to just stay out of the way, and they did a great job. So it's awesome.
yeah, it must be really interesting putting your trust into these artists because I'm sure that did you have like any like idea of what you wanted your cover to look like, or were you just like, yeah?
So no, my day job is I'm a reporter at the New York Times, and I've been there for 20 years basically. And so I have learned there that like there are photo editors, there are photographers, there's the art department, there are all of these visual people, and I am not one of them. And so my job is to back up and just say, you do your thing, and just not and truly to not get in the way. And so I very much sort of had that attitude here of sort of like, Is there anything you really don't want or whatever, there was nothing, there wasn't anything. I couldn't picture anything. So I was just excited to see what they had. So and there were two or three great options. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, they did a great job. So this is How to Sleep at Night, which came out in January, and this is your debut. So congratulations.
thank you.
And it's this really smart and funny novel about political divides, keeping your marriage alive and deciding who you want to be. And like you said, you are an award-winning reporter from the New York Times, where you cover books and the publishing industry, and you live in New York with your wife and your kids. So that's a little bit about you. But I wanted to read this. You got so many phenomenal quotes about this book, and there's two on the cover, but they're teeny tiny. So I'm going to read one that's actually not on the cover, by Dolly Alderton. She said, "This debut sparkles with wit and insight, diving headfirst into the tangled web of marriage, identity, and the politics that threaten to pull us apart. I found myself laughing and gasping in equal measure. A true testament to the complexities of modern relationships, this book is a must read for anyone who's ever wondered how to bridge the gap between who we are and who we aspire to be," which I think is a very great, encapsulates the book really well, but also that bridging that gap is something that I think a lot of us think about and have been thinking about. So I think this, makes it a great read. But I'm going to pass it off to you to talk about How to Sleep at Night, what you want people to know, book clubby things. But yeah, so thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And again, thank you everyone for having me. I do love a book club. So How to Sleep at Night is about marriage and ambition and what happens when who we are in the world doesn't match how we see ourselves. It follows a woman who's become a stay-at-home mom by accident, and it's a terrible fit for her, and she feels like an accessory in her husband's life. There's another character who's a woman whose career is her entire world, but it's a job she's come to hate. And then there are two men who are married. One is liberal, one is conservative. And as the book begins, the conservative decides to run for office. But it is not a book about politics. It's really a book about relationships, as you said. And if there's sort of one central theme in the book, it's basically about how people respond when they wake up one day and they realize they've become something in the world that they never wanted to be, right? And I think it's like a pretty universal experience, right? And it can kind of hit you at different points in your life. I think it happens a lot when people retire or when you graduate from college and you sort of being an adult out in the world for the first time. Also happens a lot at midlife, for example. And these characters are all about 40. And, you kind of wake up and you look around and sort of, I came all this way for this, and you're not where you thought you would be. And so the journey of the book is sort of watching these three people try and get their hands sort of back on the wheel of their own life, essentially, and trying to take control of their own story. Because, we all have this like very fundamental desire to be understood, right? And it's really difficult for people when you feel like how you see yourself doesn't match, the role you play in the world. And so in the process of sort of trying to get their hands back on the wheel, all the characters make these very gray decisions. And that's where the title comes from. And my wife came up with it, by the way. Good job, wife. So How to Sleep at Night is not about like Ambien. It's about, how do you live with the choices you make, right? And, so how do you build a life that you want? How far will you go to do that, even if it's, hurting your family? Or how far can you go to support the people you love, without compromising your own beliefs? And so those are some of the things that the characters are grappling with, which in the book clubs that I've joined so far have made for really interesting conversations. And the novel also spends a lot of time with parenthood. There are two couples who have young kids in the book. One of them is a 5-year-old girl named Chloe who has two dads. And that was something I was really excited about. Like, I'm gay and I have kids. And I really liked the idea of sort of, getting to introduce people to this gay family, right? And so you can sort of, and see them as a family like any other, but also they have unique challenges that straight families don't have. And then the other character from Parenthood is a really big part of the story is the woman who's a stay-at-home mom. And, to be clear, being a stay-at-home mom is like the hardest job in the world. But like any job, it's a fit issue, right? And for her, it's just not a good fit. And one thing that I worked really hard to try and get was sort of having sort of two things go on at once for her where like this is not this isn't working for her, right? And like, and raising kids is really hard. And, you know, being a stay-at-home mom requires a lot of a certain kind of patience. It requires a lot of patience for other people's children. You spend a lot of time with other people's children. Like there's stuff like that that's just not for her. And it's, you know, and she's not happy, but also her kids are the best part of her life. And so having these sort of two things exist together was really important to me. And, you know, I mean, kids are like the highest highs and the lowest lows, and you're only as happy as your least happy child, right? Is like a very true cliche. And yeah, so those were sort of things that were really interesting to me. And also trying to make the kids themselves like real, fully developed characters. Like the kids are between the ages of 5 and 9, so they're all little. But I tried really hard to make them real because, you know, often in fiction, like little kids in particular are just sort of like really cute props, and they're just sort of there to kind of like push the adult story forward, or they're like, you know, just little miniature adults with these complicated, you know, plans and whatever. And it's just, you know, they're not kids. And so I really wanted to make them feel like kids. And that's been interesting to discuss also, because, you know, people like kind of that way. It has been a surprising one to me that I hadn't really expected in discussions, but it has come up a lot. Um, and let's see, another thing that I guess is the politics in the book. So politics are in the book, like it's really just a backdrop. And it's in the book, sort of, you know, there are no real politicians in the book. This is not about a campaign. This is not about policies. It's only about politics in the way that sort of we're all dealing with it because, you know, whether it's in your household or your town or just in the country, like we are all existing with people who don't agree with us. And sort of whatever it is you believe, we all have to sort of figure out how we're living with this. And so, like, the book is not about running for office. You know, he's actually not even one of the main characters, is his husband is, and it's about what that decision does to his family. Um, and then I guess the last thing I would say is, and this is, so I've been a reporter for almost 20 years. And it's really been like hammered into me by journalism that you have to earn like every second of people's attention and you can never take that for granted. And so on every page, my goal was never be boring, you know, never be boring. If it slows it down, if it's redundant, get rid of it. And I really wanted to make the book fun and funny. And, you know, I hoped that there would be things for people to think about and talk about, but I also really just wanted to make it a good ride. And I hope people enjoy it. So how's that?
So much. That was fantastic. I actually want to touch on what you just said about being a journalist. Um, I think to some extent every book requires some sort of research. Like, could you talk about you know, the things that you did to either prepare for the book or while you were writing the book that kind of served as some form of research and how you think your background in journalism may have affected that?
Totally. Well, okay, so there's two answers to that question. The first is, so I wrote this book while working full time. My own kids were very young. My wife is a doctor and she's very busy. And so there were definitely some decisions I made in the writing of this book where I was like, I don't have time to research this. So, for example, the workaholic is a journalist and her career looks completely different than mine. But basically, my wife is a doctor and I'm a reporter. So the workaholic could either be a doctor or a reporter because I didn't have time to think of anything else. So some of the decisions were that, and you know, it's set in New York and New Jersey because I know New York and New Jersey. Part of the book takes place in Kentucky. I have family in Kentucky, like sort of that sort of thing. So some of those were sort of shorthands. But the one way that I did do research is that I did talk to a lot of people in my own family who I don't agree with politically. And I'm actually not allowed to talk about my own politics publicly because I'm a reporter at the Times. But I obviously have opinions and disagree with many people. And so I had a lot of those conversations, and I also had conversations with a couple of, there are several couples in my extended family who don't agree politically with their own spouses. And so I talked to them a lot to just sort of understand, like, that was actually the first little kernel of this, was sort of watching these people. And I don't think it's ever been anyone's like favorite thing about their marriage, but it's definitely gotten harder over the last 10 years. But they're all still married and actually like very happily so. And so I started kind of wondering, like, how do you do that? And So I had a lot of those conversations, which was instead of watching like endless hours of cable news. So I felt good about that choice. No,
Yeah.
offense, but that's a lot. Would have been a lot of research. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thank you so much. I'm gonna ask Virginia and Crystal to come back on, and I just want to say before we start answering librarians' questions, we have so much love in the chat for these books. People are really, really excited, which is fantastic. And yeah,
This is great. You can, you want to go back later and see, people are so excited for both of these books. And that's what we want. And I think that this discussion really just elevates the idea that not only are these wonderful, compelling reads in very different ways, but in the same common way, they just offer great content for conversation. It's really cool. You don't get that with every book.
mm,
So I have a question for Crystal. Let's see. Where did I lose it? Okay. While doing research, what type of this is from Sylvia Chipka Buonani. While doing research, what type of psychological and or physical effects do you personally experience?
Mm, that is very interesting. I'm actually writing an essay about this question that I got a lot in the first year of promoting the Stone Home, where people would say, like, how did you protect yourself? And I don't have a good answer for that. So the psychological, physical effects, it's hard to pin down. I mean, I wrote it over the course of a very long time. I first heard about the Stone Home in 2016, and then I really started seriously writing about it in 2018 after meeting Han Jung-san. But 2020 we had COVID. I also had my first kid during that time, like right in the middle of it. And then 2023, I had my second child. And then this came out in 2024. So who knows what the psychological and physical, changes in my body. How can I contribute to what? I'm not sure. But it was a difficult book to write. I think that in some ways, having kids was a really beautiful antidote. I was going to say, Elizabeth, I can't wait to read your book because I have two small children, and you're really in it. I think I could
Yeah,
relate
you're
to
in it.
a lot of
You're
your
really
characters.
in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I could relate to your characters. But yeah, the children were a beautiful antidote to the heaviness of the book, and they help to remind me to really like think about hope and community as an integral part of our like survival of spirit while writing the book. So I hope that answers your question in a sense. Thank
oh,
you.
and congrats on the kiddos.
Yeah, thank
Uh,
you.
So, Elizabeth, we have a question from Beth Thomas. She said, one of the things I loved about Elizabeth's book is that she managed to make each of the main characters likable in some respects and somewhat challenging in other ways, just like real people. Was it difficult for her to balance out these characters?
Oh, thank you. That's so lovely. I'm glad you think so. I guess I think I hope this doesn't sound silly, but like they really felt very real to me, these people. And like at the end of the writing process, like I'm a fiddler. And so I guess at the end of the editing process, my editor, who I adore, was like, okay, this is your last round of fiddles, no more. She was very lovely with me. But once I like finally let go of my final fiddles, I was like really sad because I was gonna miss these people. And it's just so weird having these people just kicking around in your head all the time. And then suddenly like they're kind of gone because you can't really talk to them anymore, right? Because they're not interacting. So I was and they've sort of come back to life a little bit in the promotion process, which I hadn't expected, which was sort of fun. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's sort of a roundabout way of trying to answer that. Like, I saw them all as real people, and so really did try and have them, have that come through. I mean, I like them all. Not everyone likes all these characters, but I really like them all, and I uh, but likable people can make really complicated decisions and sometimes not great decisions, right? And that's what
Mhm.
makes us human and that's what makes it interesting. And so that came fairly easily, I think, of just sort of setting these people up. And then as sort of these kind of stuff unfolded in front of them, some of them made complicated choices. But thank you. I'm so glad they felt real to other people too.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think it's weird that you said that you were gonna miss them. I've heard a lot of authors say that for sure. I can't remember what author it was that I was listening to speak. It might have been Tim O'Brien, but nobody quote me on that. Said that like his character that he kept in his back pocket for like over 10 years just kept talking to him. And he was like, I just had
Mhm.
this book. So yeah, I love hearing that. I was wondering of both of you, if you, this might be putting you on the spot a little, so feel free to take your time and be like, I don't want to answer that. If you had to formulate a question for a book club based on your books, what would you ask?
That's a great question.
That is a good question.
I definitely just put you on the spot. If Virginia can do an impression of Cher in the meantime, if you want to think.
You mean specifically for our books?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it can be general too. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be a specific character.
That's such a good question.
All right, Mullet, when
Okay.
you're ready,
Okay.
dive in. Don't feel like you have to answer it
Realized that
right
was
this
a
very
tough
second.
one. I was like, I should have prepped you for that. Sorry.
There-
Oh, I
there-
I have one kind of. I
Okay.
think it's an answer. So something that I do in the Stone Home is I have different colors associated with different characters. And so there's like an emotional tie to the color red, yellow, and purple. So it could be fun to ask a book club if they, figure that out, or like if they could tell that certain colors came up with certain characters more frequently.
Oh, I love that.
That's great.
It's way better than anything I'm going to come up with.
You can.
I don't know. Let's move on, and I'm going to think of it in the back of my head.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Grace and I are looking at two different
I can't
platforms.
hear you guys.
Oh, you can't? Can you? Can you hear us? Uh-oh.
Hmm.
What's happening?
I don't know.
Can you hear me?
I can't hear you now.
I can hear all of
Okay,
you.
now I can hear you guys now.
Oh.
It came back.
Okay, can you hear me?
Weird.
Hey, I
Yes.
can hear everyone.
I wonder what just happened outside. I don't want to know.
You
I don't
guys should say this also. I can't hear you. I can't,
know.
You're muted.
a little
You're not
flag.
muted. I can hear you now. Buy my t-shirts. Here's a here's a comment which I think is for Elizabeth, and it's from Susan Riley. And she says, I can't imagine dealing with being married to someone who has really different political beliefs. Yeah. I've known a number of marriages that broke up because of this. This book brought up a lot of issues revolving around this without slamming it over the head. So far, I haven't finished it yet.
Well, hopefully it doesn't slam it over the head. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting. And like, as I've mentioned, I have a few people in my family who are still married, but I'm sure there are marriages that have fallen apart over this. And again, like we're all dealing with it in some regard, right? Even if we're not, even if it's not in our own household, like we still have to sort of figure out how to manage that. And my
Right.
hope was to sort of explore that, but exactly without hitting anyone over the head. Like, like I never wanted this book to feel like medicine or, I really wanted it to be a fun read and for that to be sort of one of many things kind of going on at that, and not just, I mean, just to sort of like to keep it, like one, yeah, that's it. Basically, just I wanted that to be one of many, and I'm glad that this person does not feel smacked over the head with it. So success. Good. Yes.
And Susan also wrote, I've just started How to Sleep at Night, and it's terrific so far. I mean, there's lots of love for these books.
Oh, yay. Thank you. And like, thank you, librarians. Also, just in general, like such love for librarians and like what a wonderful, this is like another fun piece of this I hadn't really thought that much about because I didn't really like I knew like I cover publishing, so I know about like certain bits of the business, but I don't really know that much about sort of, kind of the outreach or the promotion aside from what happens with the media. Like that I understand, but everything else is like brand new to me. And I just hadn't really thought this much about this part, and I just love it. And it's just really fun. So thank you for having me.
And thank you both for taking the time to do this. It's really it's very helpful. And we love speaking with you. We love hearing from you. And the love in the chat box, Pam Gardhouse is from North Carolina and said, I love the Stone Home and I'm looking forward to reading How to Sleep at Night. There's such love here. So
So
um
nice.
yeah,
Mhm.
congratulations to you both on your books and on the praise, the raves, the reviews for both of these books. Crystal, for yours last year and continuing into this year, and Elizabeth for yours, which just came out just a couple months ago. It's really cool. I think I don't know if I don't see any more. There's lots of comments. I think the questions are done unless Grace, you see any others. I don't know, Elizabeth, if you wanted to go back to the question about a question for you. And yet if you don't, we can go forward from that and talk about if you all want to throw out a book or two that you're loving right now. And that's whatever is your comfort level. Believe me, we
Cheat and do
appreciate your
that.
time.
I'm like drawing a total blank. I feel like
Bring it on, Nick.
ridiculous, but I am. There are lots to discuss, so I don't know, I guess. All right, well, I'm just gonna jump to a book that I just finished that I loved, which was called Naked in the Promised Land by Lillian Faderman. It's a memoir
Mm.
about a woman who is who's a queer woman who's now 85, and basically about her life, which is research for my next novel, which I am working on, which has been a lot of fun. And that book was funny, and I learned so much. And she's really interesting. She's sort of she became an academic who's sort of like the godmother of like queer history in the U.S. basically. So she's fascinating. So recommend. Also, such a good title. Anyway.
Yeah.
I looked these up and I put them in a catalog for librarians to grab at the end. And this is an awesome cover. I'm actually so much so that I'm going to share my screen.
It's
Yeah.
so good, isn't it? It's so
This is a great,
yeah.
great cover.
Oh,
And
wow.
she is awesome. I have talked to her also like for research, and she's just like she's hilarious. She's such a mensch. She's like she's the best. So
Yeah, I just needed to share that cover. It was that good. Thank you.
Yeah, she's an institution, really.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Crystal, you want to throw out a book that you're loving?
Yeah, I just read I read it a little while ago, but it just came out. Chinu Chung's I Leave It Up to You. It is a like Korean American gay rom-com kind of novel, and it starts when the main character wakes up from a 2-year coma and realizes that his whole life has changed. He wakes up into 2021 and he's like, why is everybody wearing masks? What's going on? And he has to return to his estranged family in New Jersey and their like family sushi business.
This
So, yeah, I love this cover,
That's
right?
great.
throw it out there.
I know. Yeah, it's really like very sweet, loving, funny. And then I mean this is like a very old book, but I read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier for the first
Mm.
time.
Oh, wow.
So
Oh,
good.
good.
Yeah. Which of course I had heard for obviously many years that it was so good, but I just had never picked it up. And it was just incredible.
I
Those
love
two
that.
books.
I
Mhm.
love that. I love that. That's so awesome. Well, I can't believe we've just about filled the hour, which is typically what we do for writers to watch with 4 or 5 authors. But that's what's so wonderful about this, that we have the luxury of time that we can talk, we can ask you to talk about your books and discuss things that we think that book clubs would, how your books would lend themselves well to book clubs. And it's also fun to just know what you're reading, and I love your stories about your own experience with book clubs. I think that's super cool. And the fact that you're both willing to join a book club virtually, I mean, that's easily done as long as your schedules allow. So folks, if you're so inclined, you can reach out to us and we can put you in touch with Elizabeth and with Crystal. Grace, I feel like you have something to say. You have a face on you that goes like, what?
I did because we got one more question and I was like,
Oh,
okay,
good. What is it?
got a few minutes. So I was like, we should call it out.
Yeah.
Pam said, can you talk about the audiobook process? I do most of my reading through audiobooks. Do you listen? And what do you think audiobooks bring to the reading process? That was just a cool one I wanted to call out.
Oh, that's a great question. I listen to so I've always been a sort of paper reader, but I have to read a lot of books fairly quickly for my day job. So there's a lot of incoming. And so I started reading, doing audiobooks probably about 5 years ago when I started this beat. And now I love them. I do a lot of nonfiction on audio personally. And I'm always have an audiobook going and a paper book going. And the audiobook process was so interesting because, like, at least for me, they were like, here are five choices, and rank them in order of preference. And if you really don't like any of them, let us know and we'll find you more choices. And it was really fun. And my first choice was available, and she did such a fabulous job, and it was so cool. And then the first time I listened to like a clip of it, I was like, that's so weird, because these are like real people in my head who have voices, right? And then suddenly, like, it's this different voice, and so like I love it, and I have since listened to it, and I thought she did like such a great job. But the first moment was so surprising, just because I hadn't really, I'd been hearing them for years in these particular tones, and then it was different. But I love audiobooks, and I think they really like bring so much, just like even just in terms of like practicalities of like you can get so much more reading done, and I love that. So mhm.
Yeah, I love audiobooks too. I mostly listen to nonfiction on audio while I'm doing things around the house or walking around. And I'm still like a paper person, but I just did a book club. I just zoomed into a book club where one of the readers kind of like sheepishly said, I listened to it. Does that count? And I'm like, of course it does, you know? An audiobook is such a great way to, I think, like consume literature. I know for the Stone Home, there are three different voices. There are three different narrators for the 2011 part and Ju and Sang-cha. And so I love the kind of like texture of multiple voices. And it just adds like a new like dimension to the reading experience. And it's so much fun. Yeah.
And then we just have one more, which I think is a good one to wrap on, from Beth. She said, could the authors talk about what they are currently working on?
Oh, yeah.
You want to go first since I went first last time?
Oh, sure. I'm working on a new book that I'm really excited about. Right now it's set in like 2009, and focuses on a Korean American woman who graduates from college into the recession and then gets into a very tangled relationship with a very wealthy New York couple where the woman is Korean and the man is white. And it's very different from If You Leave Me in the Stone Home, um, just for the fact that it's closer to the present and set in New York. And it's really fun. I graduated from college in 2009 in New York, so it's fun to kind of think about those memories and think about like where did I go out and what were people wearing, and then to have this kind of very weird um, trio relationship is fun. And I'm really kind of examining like Asian American, Korean American identity, model minority identity, all that stuff. So it's been really fun. Yeah.
That sounds really good. I'm working on a novel. I'm actually on book leave from my day job to do it, which is very exciting. And let's see, it's a book about a relationship between two women that starts in the 1950s, and we follow them for about 60 years. And through them, you see how much being gay in America changed in one lifetime.
Cool.
Oh, I'm excited to read both of
They
those.
both sound
Yeah,
so great. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Um,
exciting.
Again,
that's
just
exciting.
more love in the chat for these. People are saying what a great hour it was. So I want to thank you both for joining us. It's been so
Yeah,
fun.
thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, I
This was
know.
great.
This is so fun. Thank you to the librarians. I feel like I was a pretty shy kid, and that's libraries were where I spend most of my time. So very grateful for librarians everywhere. And thank you, Virginia and Grace, for having
Yes,
us.
this was awesome. Thank you. And thank you for everyone who's watching or who's watching in the future. This is great. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Thank you,
Crystal,
thank you,
so good
thank
to
you.
meet you. You're awesome.
Yes, thank you. It's so nice meeting you too. I can't wait to read your book.
Yeah, you too.
This is a
Yeah.
whole New York based call right now. I think we are.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure we're all in New York.
We
So
could have lunch. This is
We
Yeah,
very
we
could.
could.
lunch.
Yeah. We can bring copies of each other's books to you all, to the restaurant.
Yeah.
You and I gotta
Let's do
start
that.
writing a book.
So listen, this was great. I think that book clubs that are watching when, or if you're not in a book club, maybe you'll think about joining a book club and starting one with these books. Crystal Hana Kim, Stone Home, which came out last year in hardcover and now will be out in paperback on April 15th. And Elizabeth Harris's book, How to Sleep at Night, which just came out in January. Congratulations to both of you on these wonderful books and thank you for taking the time today to speak with everyone. This was such a great hour. It was so much fun and so informative and easy and cash, and that's what we wanted. So we're glad that you could spend an hour with us and with librarians who truly appreciate this. It adds a whole nother dimension to reading a book. So thank you both. And thank you,
Thank you.
librarians. And Grace, do we have we're just gonna sort of a reminder of what we have coming up next as Writers to Watch and Galley Gab Fest. So these are great authors. And the conversation between Eleanor Littman and her audiobook narrator is going to be a blast. So we hope that you can join us, and we thank you both again for today. And be in touch with us, folks, if you would like these authors to join your book club. So take good care, and we'll see you next time. Thanks
Thanks.
again.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.